On September 8th, 2014, TMZ obtained and released surveillance footage of NFL running back Ray Rice from Atlantic City, New Jersey. The Baltimore Ravens star would get into a physical altercation with his significant other, Janae Palmer, knocking her out cold. The NFL reportedly handed Rice a 2-game suspension prior to the video's release. Once it was made public by TMZ, the Ravens, faced with no other choice, eventually cut him from the team. Rice would make the rounds on network television, owning his mistake, with Palmer by his side. It seemed as though nearly everyone condemned it. Stephen A. Smith would make the rounds for his take as well.
But what I've tried to employ the female members of my family, some of who you all met and talked to and what have you, is that, again, and this is what I've done this all my life, let's make sure we don't do anything to provoke wrong actions. Domestic violence or or whatever the case may be, with men putting their hands on women is obviously a very real issue in our society. And I think that just talking about what guys shouldn't do, we got to also make sure that you can do your part to do whatever you can do to try to make sure it doesn't happen. But at the same time, we also have to make sure that we learn as much as we can about elements of provocation. Not that there's real provocation, but the elements of provocation, you got to make sure that you address it, because what we've got to do is do what we can to try to prevent the situations from happening in any way. And I don't think that's broached enough, is all I'm saying.
It was a pathetic low moment, yet only one colleague made her voice known. That would be now ex-ESPNer Michelle Beadle. She'd write in tweets, "So I was just forced to watch this morning's first take. A, I'll never feel clean again. B, I'm now aware that I can provoke my own beating." She fired off another, "I'm thinking about wearing a miniskirt this weekend. I'd hate to think what I'd be asking for by doing so. At Stephen A. Smith, hashtag don't provoke." In another, Beadle said, "Violence isn't the victim's issue, it's the abuser's. To insinuate otherwise is irresponsible and disgusting. Walk away." She'd also add, "I was in an abusive relationship once. I'm aware that men and women can both be the abuser. To spread a message that we not provoke is wrong." Smith then read from a prepared statement.
On Friday, speaking right here on First Take on the subject of domestic violence, I made what can only amount to the most egregious error of my career, but I do sincerely apologize. As a man raised by the greatest mother in the world and 4 older sisters, I've religiously spoken out against domestic violence all of my life, particularly the victims of domestic abuse, and to my female family members and loved ones I've disappointed and who know I know better. You all deserved a better professional, and quite frankly, a better man last Friday, sitting on this very set, in this very chair.
With it, he continued his public apology, but the damage was done. The Sacramento Bee reported on July 30th of 2014, Smith would be suspended for 1 week by the worldwide leader. Beadle would reflect when asked about it on the Gimme the Hot Sauce podcast.
We all have a ton of opinions. We have platforms if we want to share them. Certain things bother me more than others, and I just felt like in those instances, why not say something? Because it's almost as if when you all work for the same company and the loudest of the mouthpieces is sort of getting all the spotlight. In my mind, the idea that the rest of the world thinks that we condone those thoughts or that no way, man. And not only that, but you're working with a ton of women and a ton of strong women. And so to have that be the sentiment that was kind of being amplified, like, no, I'm not here for that. And honestly, worst case scenario, what were they going to do? Suspend me too? Like, that's fine. I would have accepted it.
Beadle stood up for what was right and didn't bend the knee to what would become the most powerful man, at least on air, but I will say the most powerful man at the worldwide leader, ESPN. She adds she would have accepted the suspension. Smith, meanwhile, still to this day feels quite a different way about being reprimanded. In an interview on Kevin Hart's podcast, Gold Mines, Smith would say the following: "Years ago when I got suspended, because the only reprimand I've ever received in my career when I uttered the word provoke, when we were talking about the whole Ray Rice situation, and it was misconstrued, and ultimately my former boss reneged on telling me it was okay and then suspended me a couple of days later." He'd add, "The fury that I felt wasn't about the suspension, it was about the fact that I was associated with DV when I've never put my hands on a woman in my life. You would Google me and I would be associated with DV. And that's something I still haven't gotten over, to be quite honest with you. Brandon Contez would recap, in the 9 years since, Smith has continued to give thousands of takes and opinions, some of which have been condemned and garnered apologies, but having his name attached to DV headlines in any way is the gaffe that still haunts him. For Beadle, it was simply a no-brainer.
But I stand by it, and it hasn't always worked out in my favor, but I don't regret any of the things I've said. So there's that.
And still okay to wear a skirt, right?
Yeah, exactly. Still wear a skirt, damn it.